Imagine a situation that you're a super talent. You dominated go-karts, then Formula Renault 2.0, then 3.5, then GP2, Formula E. You climbed all of the bars which any champion should. And when you get a chance in Formula 1, everything suddenly turns against you. Now, most of the drivers after these results would pack their things and their bittersweet careers, move up to some GT3 series or endurance racing and go shamefully home. However, that's the point where Stofel Vandoorne proved he was not just a quick fixer after Jenson Button left McLaren, but a serious driver who in a long term could reshape the entire team. Sit tight, because I'm gonna take you on a tour of unseen dominance, politics, frustration, and after all of the struggle, dominance again. This is a story of Stofel Vandoorne. Stofel Vandoorne is a Belgian driver born on March 26, 1992 in Kortrijk. As many young kids, Stofel was quickly addicted to petrol after trying go-karts when he was 6. And this sounds a bit funny, but it can raise concerns when the average age of Formula 1 drivers beginning go-karting is usually about 3 or 4. That could be explained by modest resources of his family, considering the fact that dad was a baker and his parents didn't have any kind of resources you normally associate with racing drivers. However, that didn't stop him from quickly rising through the Belgian karting ranks and making a name by winning national titles. His victory in Belgium KF2 Championship secured him recognition, but equally important, it caught the attention of manager Eric Boulier, which would play an important role later in his career. The transition to a single-seater came in 2010, when Stofel made his debut in the F4 Eurocup 1.6. Surprisingly, he was instantly competitive, showing the adaptability that would define him to this day, and there's no other way to say it, he won the championship on the first try. 6 wins, 11 podiums and 14 races of pure speed. Such a dominance immediately placed him in the spotlight, drawing the eyes of talent scouts across Europe. It was not just the results themselves, but the manner in which he achieved them. A combination of qualifying speed, race pace consistency, calmness under pressure, all of the factors which are not common for 16-year-old drivers. In 2011 was time to move on, and Stofel stepped up to one of the most prestigious junior series at the time, Eurocup Formula Renault 2.0. Stofel finished 5th in his season. However, in 2012 he came back with a vengeance. Driving for Josef Kaufmann Racing, he dominated the championship with 4 wins and 6 other podiums, eventually taking the title ahead of Daniel Kvyat. This title established Stofel as one of the most premier young prospects in Europe, and it also served as an entry point to the McLaren Young Driver program. At that time, McLaren was a still powerhouse, and for a young driver to enter their program was a golden ticket that many considered a guaranteed stepping stone into Formula 1. Following his Formula Renault success, Stofel moved up to Formula Renault 3.5 in 2013. It was quite clear that the rumors about his adaptability were all valid when he won debuting race at Monza. No one else made such an impact on the first attempt, and across the season he added 3 more victories and finished 2nd in the championship to Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen's title propelled him directly into Formula 1. However, there's one more racing series that's filling the gap between Formula Renault and Formula 1. This series was known as GP2. Stofel joined ART Grand Prix team in 2014, and his rookie season was more than impressive. He got 4 wins including Monaco, many great and brave overtakes, top-of-the-line car, and after 21 races he finished 2nd in the championship. Honestly, the situation couldn't have looked much better for the following year, but no one could have expected to what's really gonna happen. No other driver before has achieved such a thing in GP2. Stofel continued with ART, improving his lack of qualifying pace and started to dominate qualifyings in a big style. All of the factors which made Stofel stood out, including consistency, calmness, race pace or tire inspections, all paid out. He already had 37-point lead after the fourth race, and even there's been rules like reversed spring grid which affected Stofel and are meant to prevent drivers from domination, he still climbed P1 after starting from P8. Silverstone was his worst race, with losing fights to Alexander Rossi, and finished only 3rd in the feature race. But the rest of the season continued its Stofel absolute control, and 2 weekends left, his margin on Rossi was already 169 points, making him undoubtedly the absolute 2015 GP2 champion. He won 7 races, stood out on the podium 16 times out of 21 attempts, and these numbers put Stofel next to the other GP2 super talents of Lewis Hamilton or Nico Rosberg. It was a season that made many fans believe Stofel was destined for the top seat in Formula 1, which he eventually got. kind of. The next year, 2016, was a year of Japan Super Formula. This series is often considered as a huge test of young super talents, and once again, Stofel impressed with winning 2 races and finishing 4th despite it being his rookie year. However, that same season, Stofel got a last-minute phone call about Fernando Alonso getting injured. It was on Thursday, so he left everything behind, went a trip across half a world, drove that race and secured 10th place, making the first points for McLaren that year. Yeah, you can say that it was only second race and it was not mind-blowing results, but just the sheer fact of Stofel having only simulator experience with that car and was still able to finish better than 2 world champions on the first try, that surely makes one hell of an impression. However, finally in 2017, Stofel was promoted to a full-time McLaren seat alongside Fernando Alonso. The whole vision of McLaren with Honda engines were to bring a new era of Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost from 1980s. Absolute dominant and professional collaboration that would start the second dynasty. Well, it's been the 3rd year with Honda engines and...
Embarrassing, very embarrassing. GP2, engines, GP2. How the hell they can overtake me? 300 meters behind me at the beginning of the straight. The engine was going much slower than before. Amazing. Already I have big problems now. Driving with different.
As you can see or hear Fernando, he wasn't exactly satisfied with McLaren, and Stofel got himself in the situation of battling against experienced El Matador, having one of the slowest car on 2017 grid and expectations going through the roof. Well, it didn't look that monochromatic after Fernando made the first points in debuting race in Australia. However, Stofel got a cold shower. Early in the season, the engine problems were so severe he often couldn't even complete a proper running in free practice. That left him underprepared, while Fernando already knew how to drive around the car's flaws. His first real breakthrough came in Hungary when he finished 10th and scored the first points. After the summer break, he actually started looking much stronger, which led him to 7th place in Malaysia, and Singapore scored another 7th place again. By the last third of the season, Stofel was looking more comfortable, and especially in races. And considering he wasn't really that much behind Fernando, it was 17 against 13 points in the end, the switch to Renault engine next year could have been really promising. Finally, in 2018, McLaren did get rid of Honda engines and the team hoped in increased Stofel confidence. But there's no other way to say this, it was brutal. He went from a respectable rookie showing signs of brilliance in 2017 to being statistically dismantled in 2018. Fernando outqualified Stofel every single time, and in the races Stofel sometimes recovered better, but the cap was still clear. Fernando scored 50 points while Stofel only managed to get 12. Fernando had 5 top 8 finishes, Stofel had just 2. On paper, this looked like Fernando was obliterating him, and in many ways he was. But there's the context, because the MCL 33 was unpredictable, inconsistent and generally lost. Plus, Stofel had to fight against a miles more experienced driver. In the middle of a season, there's been rumors about Lando Norris getting a Stofel seat, and it only proved right. Stofel Vandoorne then officially got thrown out of Formula 1. Well, almost. Right after McLaren dropped him, Stofel was picked up by a Mercedes as a simulator and development driver, and that was a smart move. It kept him inside the F1 paddock, allowed him to use technical skills, and kept his name circulating with a top team. At the same time, he shifted his racing focus to Formula E for 2019. Stofel signed with HWA Race Lab, which was essentially the forerunner team to Mercedes full works entry. The car was uncompetitive again, and he only scored 1 podium, but it gave him experience, and more importantly, he knew the Mercedes will officially enter Formula E the next year, and that was the turning point. Driving for Mercedes-Benz EQ team, Stofel began to show his class again. Even the fact he only took 1 victory in the final round in Berlin, the next season remains much more favorable and proved to be a great step. But since Formula E is much more competitive than Formula 1, it doesn't look like that on paper. For the 21 and 22 season, Stofel squeezed every single one of his strongest characteristics. He remained consistent, smart, reliable, and even the fact he only won 1 race, he also claimed multiple podiums and steady point finishes. Stofel Vandoorne clinched his first and the only title in Formula E in South Korea, which placed him as one of the best drivers outside of Formula 1. In parallel to Formula E, Stofel also expanded into endurance racing in LMP1 category with SMP. He didn't achieve any major success, but it more importantly bounced him into Peugeot Hypercar program, becoming one of of their factory drivers. In addition, he continued with Mercedes F1 reserve driver role until 2022, and that occasionally linked with possible F1 comebacks, but he was never seriously considered for a full-time seat again. And when someone did get COVID or did get injured or whatever happened, he was quickly overshadowed by younger stars of George Russell, Esteban Ocon or Nick de Vries. By 2023, after Mercedes left Formula E, Stoffel joined the DS Penske team, partnering with reigning champion Jean-Eric Vergne. Results were more mixed as the team struggled to match Porsche and Jaguar, but Stoffel remained as a highly respected driver in the paddock. So, while his F1 chapter was short and disappointing, Stofel Vandoorne rebuilt himself into a Formula E world champion, a factory endurance driver, trusted reserve in F1 and overall a strong person behind the scene. In some ways, he represents a modern career path for drivers who can't break through in Formula 1. But if I can share my humble opinion on Stoffel, and I'm assuming that from podcasts and interviews and Grill the Grid and other series I watched, he just seems as a too nice guy for the raw world of Formula 1. Everyone wants to bite their share of success, while the analytic and quiet approach will just never be appreciated as flamboyant Fernando Alonso or Daniel Ricciardo or funny Sebastian Vettel. But nevertheless, Stofel Vandoorne is a super talent behind the wheel, and he proved it more than once. Guys like me or maybe you cannot fully comprehend of what qualities you need for being so adaptable and professional as Stofel Vandoorne is. And that's why I respect him. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day. Bye.